In the last section, we made a very small change to our pod configuration file, updating its container port. But when we did so, we very quickly saw an error message that said that we were not allowed to update certain fields that are tied to a pod. So essentially that message is telling us that there are some fields that we are allowed to update, such as the image that a pod uses, but there are other fields we are not allowed to touch at all once the pod has been created. And so this kind of flies in the face of everything I just told you about making changes to a configuration file. In other words, how are we going to change a configuration file to change an object inside of our cluster if there are fields that we are not at all allowed to update or touch? Well, to solve this issue, we're going to start making use of a new type of object that is going to replace our usage of pod inside of our very simple application as it stands right now. So the new type of object that we're going to make use of, in addition to pods and services, is something called a deployment. A deployment is a Kubernetes object that is meant to maintain a set of identical pods. So that can be 1 pod, 2 pod, 3 pod, whatever number. And the deployment is going to constantly work to make sure that every single pod in its set that it's supposed to manage is always running the correct configuration and is always in a runnable state. In other words, it is not crashing or it's not dead or anything like that. Now, a deployment is very similar in nature to a pod. Yes, I just said a deployment contains a set or maintains a set of pods, but at the end of the day, we can use either deployments or pods with Kubernetes to run containers for our application. So let's compare and contrast some of the differences between pods and deployments. So with the pod, we're running a single set of very closely related containers. Remember, in a pod, we're only going to stick in multiple containers if they have very tight integration with each other. In reality, pods are only used in a development environment